We here begin an introduction to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah's ministry is roughly 740 BC to 700 BC. What do we know about Isaiah the man? We know his name means Yahweh gives salvation. He lived in Jerusalem, that is in the country of Judah. We know he was married and had at least 2 children. One child is Shear-Yashuv, mentioned in Isaiah 7 and verse 13. And then there's Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz in Isaiah chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. His wife is called a prophetess. She may be his second wife. He may well have been a court prophet. The question here has to do with how is it that Isaiah had such close access to the kings? There's 2 possibilities. Jewish tradition indicated that perhaps he was a relative, a member of the royal family. Alternatively, he may have been hired as a court advisor, a court prophet. Isaiah 6 describes his call to ministry. In the year that King Uzziah died, he has a vision of the Lord seated on a throne in the temple. The year that King Uzziah died is roughly 740 BC, so that's why we date the beginning of his ministry to 740. In Isaiah 20, he dramatized one of his prophecies by going around naked off and on for 3 years. There it says, "Then the Lord said, just as my servant Isaiah has gone stripped and barefoot for 3 years, as a sign and portent against Egypt and Cush, so the king of Assyria will lead away, stripped and barefoot, the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles, young and old, with buttocks bared, to Egypt's shame." So he dramatized a message that the Assyrians would come and take away naked captives by himself going around naked for a while. We also know that he wrote a history of the reign of Uzziah, a history which is now lost, but it's mentioned in 2 Chronicles 26:22, may have been one of the sources of the chronicler. We don't know anything biblically about his death. There is a tradition that's recorded in the Ascension of Isaiah, a intertestamental work, that says he was killed during the rule of Manasseh by being sawed in 2. And this may be the basis of the statement in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 37, that among the people of faith there were some that were stoned and they were sawed in 2. And so that may be the fate of Isaiah, at least it is according to the pseudepigraph work of the Ascension of Isaiah. Bit of historical backdrop of Isaiah. Isaiah begins his ministry just after what you might call the Silver Age of Israelite history. The Golden Age would be the age of David and Solomon. But the Silver Age is going to be the best time economically and politically for the kingdoms of Israel and Judah since the times of David and Solomon. It was led under the king of Uzziah, king of Judah, and Jeroboam II, king of Israel. During this period of time, Egypt and Assyria were both in decline, and therefore posed no threat to the kingdoms. And during this time, The country enjoyed unparalleled peace and prosperity, both in the northern kingdom of Israel and in the southern kingdom of Judah, and that's why we would call it the Silver Age. However, the Silver Age is brought to an end by this man portrayed here, Tiglath-Pileser III, king of Assyria. What happens is that under Tiglath-Pileser, Assyria becomes stronger again, and they begin making military campaigns to the west. In 743 BC, they subdue the northern part of Syria, the Assyrians do, and in 738 they drive deeper into Syria, and even by 738 force Menachem, king of Israel, to pay tribute, that is, pay money, to Tiglath-Pileser. Basically, it's kind of protection racket type thing. You pay money so they don't invade you. And so he did that by 738. And the Syrian inscription says this, as well as 2 Kings 15:19. By 735 BC, Ahaz is forced to give tribute to Assyria as well, and one can read about that in Isaiah chapter 7. Now, this is followed by a period of time called the Syro-Ephraimite War. And in stage one of this war, Rezin of Syria and Pekah of Israel tried to gain their freedom from the Assyrians, that is, freedom in the sense of not having to pay tribute from them by joining forces. In the next stage, they tried to get Ahaz of Judah to join with them. But Ahaz refused to do so, and that got Syria and Israel mad at Ahaz, king of Judah. Again, Isaiah 7 is the chapter of Isaiah that talks about all this. And so that leads to stage 3, in which in the year 735 or 734 BC, Syria and Israel invaded Judah in an attempt to depose Ahaz. And this forms the backdrop of Isaiah 7 and chapter 7 and 8. Stage 4, Ahaz is going to appeal to Tiglath-Pileser III. Basically, he says, I will be your vassal if you'll help me against my two enemies, Israel and Syria. Israel under Pekah and Syria under Rezin. And the next stage then, Tiglath-Pileser, he takes his time about it, but by 733 and 732, he invades, passes through Israel and Syria, goes actually all the way down to Gaza, and in the process, he defeats both Rezin and Israel. Pekah ends up being assassinated, and Hoshea will become the last king of Israel. In order to punish Israel for having rebelled against him, he reduced Israel's territory. Again, all of this is taking place during the lifetime and ministry of Isaiah. As I said, Pekah of Israel was assassinated, replaced with Hoshea, and the whole Galilee region was taken away from Israel. The region around the port city of Dor was taken away from Israel, and so was the Transjordan holdings of Israel. And these were all made into Assyrian provinces by Tiglath-Pileser, governed directly by Assyrian administrators, and no longer governed by the king of Israel. And then another very, very important event during the lifetime of Isaiah is the fall of Samaria in 722 BC, one of the big important dates of Israelite history. The northern kingdom of Israel came to an end when, according to the Bible, Shalmaneser V of Assyria invaded, defeated Samaria in 722 BC. Now, Shalmaneser V dies about that point. Then Sargon takes control, and he seems to finish up the operation, perhaps a year or so later, where he devastates Samaria, and according to his own inscription, took the population of Samaria and deported 49,000 of them and scattered them into Assyria. Again, this mop-up operation would have occurred, ballpark figure, 721 to 718 BC. But for all practical purposes, after 722, the northern kingdom is no more. And the book of Isaiah doesn't refer that much to Israel, the northern kingdom, in part because by the time the book was completed, there was no more northern kingdom as a political unit that existed. Now, later on, you have another important event that takes place in Isaiah's lifetime, the besiegement of Jerusalem by Sennacherib. Sargon dies in 705, Sennacherib takes over the throne, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, in cooperation with a Babylonian king of Babylon, Merodach-Baladan, and that cooperation is mentioned in Isaiah chapter 39, they both tried to rebel and gain their independence from Assyria. You know, when a king dies, that's a good time to rebel if you're going to rebel. And so they both do. But unfortunately, once Sennacherib got his act together and was fully consolidated, he first invaded Babylon and ran Merodach-Baladan out of town. But then in the year 701 BC, another one of these important dates, Sennacherib invades Judah. He captures the city of Lachish, battle scenes of which he put in his palace wall, and it's now found in the British Museum. He besieged Jerusalem. And in his own annals, he talks about how he had Hezekiah like a bird in a cage in his royal city of Jerusalem. But according to Isaiah, by an act of God, God saved Hezekiah. By the way, here's some of the battle scenes at Lachish, actually, in reliefs now found in the British Museum. Shows him soldiers impaling some of the citizens of Lachish, and here it also shows some of the battle scene, the Assyrians shooting their arrows, and the Judahites shooting from the walls, and so on and so forth. Another version of that scene, schematized where it's actually easier to see things. Here you can see they're coming up with a siege engine to try to knock down the wall or the gate or whatever. So anyway, very important event is this event of 701 BC. Again, according to the Bible, God performed a miracle in which 185,000 of the Assyrian army suddenly died, so that Sennacherib had to break his besiegement. Let me very quickly mention a few other events after Isaiah's lifetime that are relevant to his prophecies. You have the Babylonian exile that goes from around 586 to 539 BC, and some of his prophecies relate to that. Particularly chapter 39, it predicts it. And some of the prophecies, second half of the book, assumes that they'll go into exile. 2, you have the story of Cyrus, king of Persia, who takes over in 539. And Cyrus is mentioned in the book too, which is going to be important for critical issues. Specifically the question of how can Isaiah mention somebody who was not even born during his lifetime. Well, that'll lead us to